Introducing Oakley Meta Vanguard, the new performance AI glasses designed for athletes with an action-ready ultra-wide camera, powerful open-ear speakers, and built-in Meta AI that syncs with your Garmin devices for real-time insights while you train. Take your performance to the next level with Oakley Meta Vanguard. Athletic intelligence is here. Learn more on meta.com.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk.
What is up, Sooner Nation? Man, Ole Miss, right? Ole Miss coming to town on Saturday. Big matchup for the Sooners as they continue their climb in the AP, in the coaches, in the SEC rankings. We do have power rankings that we're going to talk about today. I want to talk about Oklahoma's offense today. Lane Kiffin is forcing us. He's forcing us to talk about Oklahoma's defense. I was going to try to save some of that for Thursday's podcast, but we don't have a choice here because of the old Lane train. Man, I'm conflicted on this. I'm just going to shoot you straight. I'm conflicted on Lane Kiffin's comments. And here's the reason why. Let me start with this disclaimer. There are people, and we love them because they're a part of Sooner Nation. They are us, right? But there is a portion of Sooner Nation that they watch the football games, whether they're doing it consciously or subconsciously. They watch the games not necessarily to cheer, but more just to complain. They've got to complain. There's a guy in section 19, row 25. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. You know that person. I think every cluster has that person. Here's a great example of what I'm talking about. Think back to the Kent State game. To Mike Hawkins, right? That first touchdown pass, he scrambles to his right. He's got defenders draped all over him. He throws a dime to Isaiah Sategna. Touchdown. And there's a lot of Sooner Nation who said, man, what a great play. What a gutsy play. What a heads-up play. What a tough play for a young quarterback to make, right? But then there was that part of Sooner Nation who was like, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that because, you know, if the defense was in position instead of out of position, if the pass was errant instead of on the money, if it was a better team, that would be an interception. But you know what? It wasn't an errant pass. It wasn't a better team. The defense wasn't in position, and it was a touchdown. And most of Sooner Nation celebrated that. And a portion of Sooner Nation criticized. Why am I telling you this? Because I think also that same mindset with a portion of Sooner Nation and I'll tell you this, a portion of the media, they jump in here looking for criticism. That you got to find a way to criticize the opponent. You just have to. And some opponents make it really easy. I mean, they do. Some opponents, I mean, it's there. You can't avoid it. You got to criticize. But sometimes you got to dig and sometimes you got to stretch to come up with that criticism. And I really, honestly, I really feel that's what we're doing with Lane Kiffin. If you don't know, I mean, look, earlier in the week in his show, he said probably one of the most backhanded compliments that you'll hear all season, right? He says about Oklahoma, this is probably statistically the best defense we've ever played here. But then he added that Oklahoma, quote, somehow gets the information to the guys and that they do things that are very abnormal when they see plays coming. Now, let's stop right here for two things. Number one, Oklahoma's defense. I don't know how often this happens, but I know it doesn't happen very often. Oklahoma's defense is on pace to record 99 quarterback sacks this season. So with that, you could say this defense has a chance. This defense has a chance to sack the quarterback 100 times. That's abnormal. I'm telling you, that's abnormal. And so what Lane Kiffin is saying is not wrong. It's not wrong. And what you people want to say, wait a minute. Is Lane accusing Oklahoma of stealing signals? And I'm going to give you another quote here that kind of takes that a step further. But some people ran with this. They put it in print. They put it on social media. They put it in their podcast. But I think you've got to understand who we're talking about here. This is Lane Kiffin. He's not your typical coach. He is the king of sarcasm in college football. This is the same guy who mocked Kirby Smart just last Saturday for calling a timeout. You know, he told the ref, I was just clapping, making fun of Kirby Smart from a previous game this season when, timeout gate. Again, I don't want to delve into all of that, but if you know the story, you know the story. And what does Lane do in the game last week? Calls a timeout, tells the official, I was just clapping. The official got a laugh out of it. Lane Kiffin got a laugh out of it. Most of the college football world got a laugh out of it. Because Lane Kiffin, he's not just a coach, he's a performer. That is his personality. And so I think when he makes a comment like that, you have to read the room. You have to know the personality. I think he's making fun. I think he's just kind of poking some fun, maybe even trying to plant a little seed of distraction as the game approaches on Saturday. And honestly, man, that is classic Lane Kiffin. But let's look at the actual substance of what he said. Because if you strip away the sarcasm, he's not wrong. This Oklahoma defense, they are elite. And they study film like crazy. They anticipate plays because they've done their homework. And when you combine that with Brent Venables' system, one that thrives on pre-snap recognition and disguised pressures, you get a defense that looks like it knows what's coming. And you know why? Because a lot of times they do. And it's not because they stole the signals. It's because they did the homework. And Venables even said it himself in his weekly show. He complimented Lane Kiffin's offense. He complimented the communication that they have. And then he asked Southern Nation, stay loud because the noise can disrupt their efficiency. And that's a respectful exchange between two football minds. Lane gives like a sarcastic compliment. Brent returns it with a serious one. And somewhere in there, the media and some of the fan base decided this has got to be a controversy. But it's not. This is not Michigan 2.0. There's no one with a spy camera decoding wristbands. And, this is called film study. That's what it is. And Oklahoma's defense has mastered it. So if you're Ole Miss and you think they knew your plays, maybe that's a credit to Venables and his staff for out preparing you. But here's my take on all this, right? Lane Kiffin knows exactly what he's doing. He's smart, he's calculated, and he's great at manipulating the media cycle. Because now instead of talking about how this team is going to handle, the best defense in the SEC, everyone else is talking about whether Oklahoma is stealing signals. That is called misdirection. That's classic Lane Kiffin. And he even took it a step further. I mean, I want you to see the genius in this. He took it a step further and he talked about Hugh Freeze. He was after the Oklahoma-Auburn game. And he said to Hugh Freeze, according to him, hey, maybe you should change up your signals because I think they know your signals. So he says that to Hugh Freeze. And then everyone, again, what do, man? We just, bulletin board material. No, man. I mean, look, if Oklahoma beat Auburn because they knew the signals, does that mean, did Texas A&M? I think they sacked Jackson Arnold 7 times. Did they know the signals? Did Georgia know the signals? Last Saturday night, did Missouri know the signals? But think about it. Here it is. Auburn thinks they were robbed. Auburn thinks that they unjustly lost to Oklahoma. So by including this, you've got the Ole Miss fan base riled up. They're going to be, oh, you guys steal signals. You got the Oklahoma fan base riled up. Yeah, we're just really good on defense, which we are. And now you've got the Auburn fan base jumping back in here about how terrible and cheating and swindling Oklahoma is. I mean, this dude poked the bear and threw a hornet's nest on top of it. And he did it on purpose. And Brent Venables, he didn't bite. He brushed it off. He said it was a weird compliment. And then he just goes back to business. And that's what good programs do. They don't take the bait. And you know what this really shows me? This shows me that Oklahoma has arrived. You don't get talked about like this unless you're scaring people. When your defense is dominant, people start looking for reasons, any reason, why it can't be possibly as good as it looks. But guess what? It is. And honestly, I mean, if you're worried about someone decoding your signals, right? You're worried about someone stealing them, maybe don't make them so easy. Maybe don't make them so accessible. So now that we've cleared that up, let's flip the script just a little bit. Because as good as Oklahoma's defense is, and as much as it's carrying this team right now, the spotlight this week might actually shift to the other side of the ball. We know what Brent Venables can do defensively. The question is, what can Ben Arbuckle's offense do when it's time to punch back? And so here's where I want to go today in this episode of the Sooner Nation podcast. Is Oklahoma ready to open up the offense? John Mateer was efficient last week, but not explosive. The Sooners played it safe, they were smart, and they were mistake-free, and it worked. But Ole Miss, it's a different animal. Ole Miss forces you to play fast. They make you score to keep up. And that means it might be time for Oklahoma to stretch the field. It might be time for Oklahoma to go back to tempo and let this offense breathe a little bit. So we're going to get into that here in just a few minutes. We're going to talk about Mateer. We'll talk about Arbuckle. We'll talk about whether Oklahoma has the firepower to win a shootout here in the conference. But first, we got to take a look at where the Sooners and the rest of the conference stack up. So let's get ready for this week's SEC Power Rankings because guess what? There's been some movement.
This episode is brought to you by Casamigos Tequila. What do you bring to a holiday party? Simple. A bottle of Casamigos. Because nothing gets the party started like a Casamigos margarita, which isn't just for summer. In fact, it's the perfect pour all year round. Casamigos is the gift that always feels right. Because anything goes with my Casamigos. Please drink responsibly. Imported by Casamigos Spirits Company, White Plains, New York. Casamigos Tequila, 40% alcohol by volume.
This episode is brought to you by Contentful. Marketers, you know that feeling when your creative clicks? When that social post sends engagement through the roof? When your outside-of-the-box campaign hits ROI positive? When a personalized homepage turns prospects into customers? It's utter marketing bliss. Contentful helps you create tailored omni-channel experiences without working overtime. No stress, no limits, only possibilities. Get the feels at contentful.com.
All right, let's start here with a couple of quick disclaimers. Someone said to me, not in a rude way, not in a mean way, not in a bad way, like, dude, do you live in the street? Because there are often times when I'm recording here in the Sooner Nation studio, you hear street noise. And the truth is, I don't live in the street. I live on a street like most normal people do. I just happen to live in a really big city. I live in a city of 2 million people. And my apartment, it faces the street. And so sometimes there's street traffic and that brings street noise. And I'm sorry for that. Hopefully it's not too big of a distraction. The second thing is, like on cue right there, I could not have planned that better. I'm sure you heard that motorcycle. The second thing is, it's Thunder basketball time. So that means that we're going to probably start at some point soon dedicating one segment of the Tuesday podcast to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Not a full podcast, but just a segment. And we'll give you a heads up so you can fast forward if you're not interested. If you only want the Sooner content, then you only get the Sooner content. But there is a lot of people out there who are also fans of not only the Oklahoma Sooners, but the NBA, the defending NBA champions. So we're going to throw them a bone as well because we do that on the website as it is. But it is Tuesday. It's Tuesday, and that means we are here for your overreactions. We're here for course corrections, and we're here for good old-fashioned arguments. That is the SEC power rankings. Now, you can see the collective power rankings on our website, heartland-sports.com. There are 3 of us, Craig, Caleb, myself, that jump in there, and we give you a consensus ranking. But I want to tell you about mine. These are Matt's rankings. And week 9 is come and gone, and some things stayed the same on my ballot. Some things changed. Like, for example, staying the same, Texas A&M, Alabama, they're neck and neck at the top. And there's been plenty of movement elsewhere. Let me tell you that this week's rankings stirred up a few conversations behind the scenes. I've already received some messages on social media. We've got teams that are rising. We've got teams that are holding on for life. We've got a coaching change that probably deserves more attention than the score that was on the field on Saturday. But let me just, before we dive into all of it, here's the thing. If you look at our consensus rankings at the website, it's based on a 3-voter system. Each of us ranks all 16 teams from top to bottom. And then there's like a point assigned to each one of them. For example, 16 points for first place, 15 for second, and so on. We total them up, and that gives us our composite rankings each week. And you can go to Heartland Sports. If you're looking at that post, you can scroll down, and you can see all 3 of our individual ballots. And trust me, there are some big differences this week. There's big differences every week, and you want to see them, and a lot of people want to talk about them. But let's start at the top, because I think last week we started at 16 and worked our way to 1. We're going to start at 1 and work our way down. After a few weeks, going back and forth, for me, I've been telling you to look out for Alabama for a long time. And I put them at number 1 last week, and I've got them at number 1 again this week. Now, I would tell you on the consensus rankings, they're not number 1. But I have them ahead of Texas A&M. After, especially, the 37-20 win over Tennessee, that solidified it for me. And now, A&M, they didn't lose. But if we're being honest, they didn't look like the better team either. You got a 45-42 shootout win against Arkansas, who had, fired their coach, but the Hogs exposed, I believe, a lot of defensive cracks. Now, to their credit, Texas A&M still undefeated, still talented. But for me, right now, Alabama just looks more complete. Ty Simpson has settled nicely. The offense is balanced. The defense continues to suffocate teams when it matters the most. So I've got Alabama 1, Texas A&M 2, and then there's Georgia number 3. Now, I will tell you again, consensus rankings, all of us had Georgia at number 3. It was the only position from 1 through 16 that we all had Georgia at the same place. We all had one team in the same place. So we agreed on something here. And Georgia's win over Ole Miss, I think, was vintage Georgia. Physical, composed. Gunnar Stockton threw 4 touchdown passes. And it feels like Kirby Smart's team is rebounding into form right on schedule, which may be bad news for the teams that are coming up. Now, remember, I picked early in the season, week 1, I picked Alabama and Georgia in the conference championship game. So I got to kind of stick to my guns here, but I will tell you this. I'm giving A&M their due. I've got the Aggies number 2, Georgia number 3, and then here's where things start to get fun. Oklahoma, they're climbing. They had a good win over South Carolina. The problem here is, what do you do with Texas, right? Because Texas looked awful. Their overtime win at Kentucky, it wasn't pretty. But again, I mean, in this conference, surviving on the road counts for something. I think Texas was like a 12.5-point favorite, and they scored 16 points total. Arch Manning rode the struggle bus in and out of Lexington, but they found a way to win. And you know, the only thing missing from the Longhorns right now is consistency. And because of that, they've got to be ahead of Oklahoma. I hate that because they won. They've got to be ahead of Oklahoma because they beat Oklahoma. So Oklahoma climbs, but not ahead of Texas just yet. I've got Texas 4. I've got Oklahoma 5. And then, you know, we're looking ahead. Ole Miss, there they are, number 6. They drop after their loss to Georgia. But I still feel like this is a dangerous team. Offensively, they are one of the best teams in the league. And if Oklahoma can handle that type of tempo, they can keep the running backs in check, keep the quarterbacks in check. They'll make a serious statement about being SEC contenders. And when you're looking at how do you get ahead of Texas when Texas beats you, this is how. This is how. But you got to earn that. And South Carolina was a good win for Oklahoma. Kentucky was a terrible win for Texas, but a week removed from that game, it's just not time. It's not time yet. You got to go to number 7. I think give a shout out to Vanderbilt, who's there. I've been slow coming with the Commodores, but I think it's the highest ranking I've had them all season. Pavia ran for 86 yards, 2 scores. They were favored over LSU. They looked like the better team than LSU. And I think they're a legitimate problem in this league. And I don't know that that's something that any of us really expected to say back in September. I thought that this was a team that peaked in 2024 and would take a step back in 2025. I think they're better than they were in 2024. And so now but now we get into the bottom third of the rankings, and I think there's some controversy here. You look at Florida. The fans, they're not happy. They're not happy with anything that's happened, right, on the football field this season. And I get it. They deserve to not be happy. So probably if you're a Gators fan and you looked at my rankings, you're not going to be happy. Because I've got Vanderbilt 7, LSU number 8, Missouri 9, Tennessee 10. And then when you get into 11 and on, I've got Mississippi State at 11, Florida 12. And guess what? Florida just beat Mississippi State. But you know what they did right after they beat Mississippi State? They fired their coach. So like you say, how in the world can we rank Mississippi State ahead of Florida when the Gators just beat them? That's a fair question. I'm not going to like make fun of you for asking that question. I will not berate you for asking that question. Here's the reasoning. Here's what I put into this. And you can tell me I'm wrong. You can tell me I'm crazy. And you know what? I may not even argue with you over it. When you look at power rankings, it's not just a single Saturday afternoon. I'm looking at the overall body of work. I'm looking at the direction of the program, and I'm looking at how each team looks right now. Mississippi State, even in defeat, has shown more week-to-week improvement than Florida. They've been in every game. Blake Shapen's quietly putting up big numbers, and the defense, while inconsistent, has found a little bit of rhythm. Meanwhile, Florida, they've been on a roller coaster. They finally get some traction by beating Texas. Then they lose, and then they beat Florida. They beat Florida. Then they beat Mississippi State. So yeah, they won in week 9. And they've won 2 of their last 3, including that big one over Texas. But the larger context matters here. And so does what's happening behind the scenes. And the Gators just fired Billy Napier. And that tells us everything we need to know about where that program is mentally. Let's be real. This wasn't a reaction to Saturday's game because Saturday's game was a win. This was a decision that's been in motion for weeks. Everybody heard the rumors. Everybody knew about it. And when you fire a coach who just beat Texas and has won 2 of the last 3 coming off of a win against Mississippi State, when you fire him coming off of a win, that's not about one Saturday scoreboard. That's about the leadership deciding that the direction had already stalled. And what they were afraid of was Billy Napier was starting to gain traction because this program was starting to gain traction. If Billy Napier is the head coach going into the bye week, Florida is ahead of Mississippi State. But Billy Napier is not the head coach going into the bye week. And you fired a coach who finally started getting momentum. And so Florida never really got its footing. They had moments, they had flashes of what could have been. But in this conference, flashes, they don't buy you time. And when you look around and you see first, second-year coaches turning programs around in places like, Norman, Nashville, College Station, it's clear that Florida didn't want to fall behind in the next recruiting cycle. So they fired him. They fired him going into the bye week. So, yeah, Florida beat Mississippi State, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are the better team right now on the Tuesday after that game. You've got an interim staff taking over. You've got transition about to take over. And Mississippi State, they still look like a team starting to trend upward, even though they've had their own struggles. So where does that leave us? At the top, you got Alabama looking like Alabama. Texas A&M hanging on, but their defensive issues are worth watching moving forward. Georgia, steady. Texas still there. Oklahoma surging. Ole Miss, dangerous but flawed. Then Vanderbilt. They're the surprise story of the year. And, you go down lower below Florida, you got programs in survival mode. You got South Carolina, Arkansas, Kentucky. And we actually had on our consensus, we have 15 rankings because we don't have a 16th. And the reason why is because Arkansas and Kentucky have been so bad that we couldn't decide on who was the worst team in the conference. So we tied Arkansas and Kentucky at the very bottom. So in full disclosure, here it is, the full rankings. I've given you a bunch of word salad, but here's what I got. 1 is Alabama, 2 is Texas A&M, 3 is Georgia, 4 is Texas, 5 Oklahoma, 6 Ole Miss, 7 Vanderbilt, 8 LSU, 9 Missouri, Tennessee rounds out the top 10. Mississippi State at 11, Florida at 12, Auburn 13, Kentucky 14. I've got South Carolina at 15. And then Arkansas at 16, and I'm probably the reason why we can't figure out who the worst team is because I threw South Carolina in that mix. So this week it felt like in the conference, it felt like a pivot in the season a little bit. You got some front runners that are starting to separate again. You got mid-tier teams that are scrapping to stay relevant, and for Florida, they're back to the drawing board. And again, I just, I probably don't do a well enough job at promoting the website here on the podcast, but I also don't want to over promote. But you could go to heartland-sports.com, and I would encourage you to go check out how all three of us rank the teams individually. You'll see where we agreed. You'll see where we're miles apart, and maybe you'll be the voice of reason that figures out which one of us still believes in the Missouri Tigers. So, SEC Power Rankings for going into Week 9. This is the part where I get to ask you to do the subscribe button, drop your comments. Every podcast has its own individual post on the website. You're also on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, wherever you catch us. Thank you. Let us know where you think we're right. Let us know where you think you're wrong, because we're probably wrong. We're probably wrong. I was just going to throw that out there that we probably are. That's why we're going to revisit again next week and find out whether, to me, Alabama stays on top or if the Aggies or the Bulldogs or maybe even the Sooners have something to say about it. Let's start thinking about what is Oklahoma's offense capable of.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like expecting the leadership of a team captain on the football field, but getting a sea captain. You wouldn't settle for just anything for your team. Shouldn't it be the same for your insurance? So don't settle for just any insurance when you can go with a leader. State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
So Ole Miss coming to Norman on Saturday, 11 a.m. kickoff. SEC Nation will be there. Sooners right now, 4.5-point favorite. Again, I'm recording on Tuesday. 4.5-point favorite over the Rebels. I'm really curious to see. I really do more of a dive on that Thursday and Friday, where the money's coming in, how that point line is adjusted throughout the week. I think they opened up at a 5.5 on Sunday, so it's already down to 4.5. That means I think money's coming in Ole Miss. It's going to be fun to look at, and obviously, on the Thursday podcast, we'll give you our score predictions. But here's the question on my mind. It's not about the defense. It's not about Lane Kiffin's comments. It's about the offense. And we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast and on the website. Oklahoma's coming off a dominant win at South Carolina where the defense was just absolutely lights out. But now you've got an offense rolling into Norman where we have to ask a different question. I believe it's time to ask, is Oklahoma, with John Mateer's hand, are the Sooners ready to open up the offense? Because last week, they leaned on discipline. They leaned on control, and it worked. It worked. But against Ole Miss, we're looking at a team that thrives on chaos. And the Sooners may have to. They may have to trade that control for explosiveness. So let's start here. Oklahoma has been efficient under John Mateer. He's completing passes at a high rate. He's getting better at protecting the football, but he's showing poise. And it fits perfectly with the complementary football model that Brent Venables likes to have with offense complementing defense. But here's the trade-off. Efficiency last week came at the cost of explosiveness. And when you look at the season as a whole, the Sooners rank near the bottom half of the SEC in plays of 30 yards or more. Most of their scoring drives have been on methodical clock-eating possessions, which personally, I love that. And that's great. That's great when your defense is dominating like it did in Columbia last week. But it also becomes risky against teams that can light up the scoreboard in a hurry. And that's exactly who's coming to town on Saturday. Ole Miss is fast. They are aggressive, and they are built offensively to make you uncomfortable defensively. They don't want you to get set. They don't want you to breathe. And they definitely don't want you to be the one who dictates the tempo. And so if Oklahoma tries to play ball control football against Lane Kiffin, they might find themselves chasing points in the first half. And the key here is John Mateer, because this game might define how we view him moving forward. His efficiency has been his calling card. He looked new and improved last week, not forcing throws, not panicking under pressure, and he showed a veteran's calm in his decision-making. Now, keep in mind, he's a first-year starter in this conference. This is the highest level of competition he's played week in and week out in his entire career. But now is his hand completely better? Because Ole Miss is the game where they thought, this is where he'll be better. So Ole Miss will be his third game back. And a lot of us, I'm one of them, thought it would be his first game back. It's time to see if he can attack. Ole Miss is going to load the box. They're going to bring pressure, and they're going to dare Oklahoma to beat them over the top. What that means is that Mateer has to be willing to take shots downfield. He's got to trust his arm, and he's got to trust his receivers. And so that's where guys like Giovanni Gibson, Isaiah Satania, Deion Burks, they become critical. Satania gives you that vertical speed threat. And so does Gibson as well. That guy who can stretch the field and back defenders off from the line. And Burks is the one who can kind of be the blazing speed dude. You can give him a short pass, but if you're not right on him, he can turn a 3-yard pass into a 15-yard gain in a hurry. And then that's not even to mention Jaren Kanak, who's been pretty quiet. And if Oklahoma can get this group involved early and mix in a couple of deep shots, then I don't know that you need a trick play to loosen up this defense. It would open up everything for Ben Arbuckle and his playbook if they can loosen up the defense by going over the top. And I feel like this is the week for Arbuckle to really put his stamp on the offense. I've said this. It's not a criticism. It's just truth. He was outcoached in the Cotton Bowl against Texas. He came back and had a terrific game plan at South Carolina. But now he's got to have another game plan. And it's got to be different than what was in the Cotton Bowl. It's got to be different than what is in Columbia. And when he came to Norman, we knew his system could be explosive, but we also knew that he was young. And we also knew that he wasn't crazy experienced. And at Washington State, his offenses were built around quick rhythm, tempo, and creative spacing. And while we've seen some flashes of that this year, we've not seen the full version yet. And I believe that part of that is by design. Oklahoma's been, and they have, because, Arbuckle didn't have this luxury at Washington State. They've been playing complementary football to keep their defense fresh, because this defense is the best part of this team. And if there were ever a week, though, to pull out the old full Arbuckle playbook, I think this is it. To use tempo, force Ole Miss to play on its heels, mix in quick screens on the perimeter, stretch the field vertically, and then make those linebackers think twice before they blitz. And when Oklahoma's offense does its best work, it's not just efficient, it becomes unpredictable. And we saw that early in the season, where the Sooners use pace, formation changes, and creative motion to keep Michigan guessing. They did it they had some success with that against Auburn. And I think that's what needs to return this weekend. There's a philosophical question here as well. Brent Venables has built this team around toughness, and he's built them around defense. And it has been absolutely the right call. It's been a patient process, but it's been the right process. And it's what Oklahoma needed after years of being a one-sided program, an offense-only program. But the defense is stable now. And it is time for the offense to take the next step. Because the truth is this: if Oklahoma wants to win in this conference, if they want to compete with Alabama and Georgia, if they want to compete with Ole Miss, they can't just rely on their defense. You can't keep winning games 24-6, 24-7, those type of things. This is the modern era of the SEC. You have to be able to score with the scores. Look at Alabama's scores. Look at Georgia's scores. Look at Tennessee's scores. This isn't the old grinded out 3 yards in a cloud of dust SEC. These are offenses that can score and produce chunk plays in a hurry. And that's the challenge this week for Oklahoma. Can the Sooners push the tempo without losing discipline? Can they stay aggressive without getting reckless? Can they adapt their offensive identity from protecting to controlling? And so these are the questions that I think we're going to get answers to on Saturday. And here's what I'm going to be looking for. Me personally, early in this game, here's what I want to see. I'm going to be looking at the first 10 plays, offensive plays for Oklahoma. If the Sooners go conservative, like heavy runs, short throws, chew up the clock, that tells me that they're sticking to what has worked. But if we see early shots down the field to Giovanni Gibson, I started to say Andrew Anthony, he gone, to Deion Burks, to Isaiah Sategna, that means that Arbuckle is going to try to cut things loose a little bit. I'm looking at tempo adjustments. When Ole Miss starts pressing the gas, does Oklahoma respond with the same type of pace, or do they keep grinding out clock to keep Ole Miss on the sidelines? I think that's going to show us how confident they are, and not just Mateer's command of the offense, but the health of his hand. And then I want to see big play creation. Oklahoma doesn't have to score on every drive, but I think they do need to have a few chunk plays in this game. And if the Sooners can hit a couple of explosive passes early, it's going to change the tone of the game, because it's going to change how Ole Miss can defend the Sooners. So here's my take on all of this. Oklahoma's defense, they've proven that they can carry the team. Now it's the offense's turn to show that they can win a game. John Mateer doesn't have to throw for 400 yards, but he does need to make Ole Miss pay for crowding the line of scrimmage. And Ben Arbuckle needs to trust his playbook and his quarterback. He's got to trust him enough to play with some freedom. So this game, to me, it's not just about beating Ole Miss. It's about proving that Oklahoma has the balance for a long stretch here, the final stretch of the season. Because if the Sooners compare what Brent Venables' defense with an offense that can explode when it's needed, man, this isn't just a good team. This is a championship caliber team. And that's all we wanted, right? That's all we had hoped for. That's going to wrap it up for us on this edition of the Sooner Nation podcast. I hope you're having a great week. We'll be back Thursday for more of a full Oklahoma Ole Miss preview, including our score predictions. You can find us every day at heartland-sports.com. You can find us on Facebook, over 15,000 strong on our Facebook following. Thank you for everyone who's a part of that community. Have a great middle of the week. We'll talk to you Thursday.